Derrick Lewis is obviously unorthodox.
But he was just getting mauled in that last fight.
It doesn't matter when you win.
I guess it doesn't matter when you get that last punch into it.
Well, it's still the power that he has can
and I'm
change
not talking.
the
That guy would murder me with his finger. You know, like, why am I even talking about
this? Well, he's
this?
the
But
number
I'm just
2
a fan,
contender.
you know?
I mean, he really was the number 2 contender headed into that fight, and then wins. I think that guy was the dark horse of the division.
Yeah.
And so for him to knock out Alexander like that, I mean, that was a giant knockout.
Yeah.
And to get his ass kicked for 3 rounds.
Respect to Alexander, though.
Yeah.
For staying in the pocket, fighting out with 30 seconds to go when he's clearly winning that fight.
Well, he got hurt. He got hurt a couple times in that fight.
Did he?
Yeah. There was one time where he lost his mouthpiece and he tried to give it to Derrick.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
I think he was on Queer Street. I don't think he knew what the fuck was going on. Because Derrick hits so hard. Even if you don't get knocked out, you're probably like, oh,
even a glancing blow, right?
Yeah, you're probably like, what in the fuck? I mean, think about the way he knocked out Travis Brown, the way he knocked out Gonzaga. And Derrick would be even better if he didn't have a bad back. Derrick's got a fucked up back.
Dana White was asked about George St. Pierre and his seeming willingness or desire to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov, and George clearly sees the upside, Kenny, of that fight. But Dana White came out and said that if he is going to try to drop down to 155 pounds, he would first have to take on one of these contender types. Now, the UFC did right George St. Pierre when he came out of retirement, 4 years out of the game. They gave an immediate UFC middleweight title shot to him against Michael Bisping, which he took advantage of, obviously. But this time around, I think you got to understand where Dana's coming from. To inject George into this division that is top-heavy and absolutely loaded and have him pass by all of these contenders, I understand the money play would be to make GSP Khabib, but I kind of like the UFC taking a stance here and saying, look, we appreciate your body of work, but we got Tony Ferguson, a lot of guys waiting in the wings that are, at least on paper, more worthy of that championship opportunity.
Oh, sure. But, in this game, you don't pick what's most worthy, who is most worthy, right? First of all,
most of the time, you're right.
You know what I'm saying? It's the money game. So the fact that they're going this route, I think, is a great thing. Tony Ferguson absolutely deserves this shot. No doubt about it. Is that why they're doing that? Probably not. Listen, I think a fight between George St. Pierre and Khabib Nurmagomedov would be a huge fight, would be a massive fight. I'd say this, Khabib should fight Tony Ferguson. Let's see if they could get it done for a 4th time. Would be the 4th time or the 5th time?
I think the 5th.
Jesus. All right. Well, yeah, 5th time. Let's see if the 5th time is the charm. And make that fight happen. If Khabib is able to get by Tony Ferguson, no easy task. Then you make a super fight. Because obviously here's the big problem, right? The UFC knows that George St. Pierre most likely isn't going to defend that title. He's going to fight once and go home. So, which I get to. He's deserving of a super fight. The guy has done it all. This would be his 3rd world championship, which would be just unbelievable. But you do it at maybe 160 pounds or 165, whatever Khabib agrees to. I know Khabib isn't a big fan of cutting down to 155 consistently like that. Do a super fight and then, one of those guys or both of those guys right off into the sunset.
So how do you feel about GSP potentially cutting down to 155 pounds? Right. Or is your thesis statement just far be it from me to doubt this guy when it comes to putting his mind to something and accomplishing that task?
Right. Well, listen, I think he's a guy, first of all, that is mentally strong enough to make that weight. I don't know how he would fight at that weight. That's a whole thing. Right. That's a whole different animal. I made 145, but really did not bring everything I had on fight night. I was just too sapped. I don't know what George would be able to bring on fight night. Would he make the weight? I absolutely believe he would. Would he still be a tough challenge for Khabib? Absolutely. Would it be the same George St. Pierre that we're used to seeing? I don't know. 155 is a big cut. I do know he's walking around much lighter than he used to. Supposedly mid-180s, which a lot of 155ers walk around at. Not a lot, but a lot of the larger ones, right? You look at... trying to think, Khabib Nurmagomedov
Felder
himself, Gray Maynard, Paul Felder, Kevin Lee. These guys are huge lightweights that walk around, high 180s, maybe 190s. Maybe 190s.
I mean, Paul Felder has intimated publicly that he has walked around north of 190.
Right, that's insane. So I think he's totally capable of doing that, but I think something that would make a little bit more sense would be, a super fight in the 160s. So, yeah.
I wonder if George St. Pierre would come back if there wasn't a championship scenario. It would seem to me like maybe a super fight at a catchweight against a guy who is 27-0 and the most dominant force in the game at present would have the appeal that would bring him back. But I think if there's not a belt on the line, I'm not sure that George would be willing or want to put in all the work that comes before it. But an interesting talking point nonetheless. And I think for me, my biggest takeaway is that Dana White is wanting to make Tony and Khabib again. And I think that is very exciting because that is the dream matchup, I think, for 90% of the avid mixed martial arts fans. And even though, the odds are in favor, Kenny, of that fight staying together, right? It's gone away 4 times. I don't want to sit here and say, fifth time's going to be the charm, but the odds are so in favor of those guys making it to fight night because 4 times one or the other hasn't been able to do so.